where we stand in general on those properties and where we'll be going next. So just in this a very brief summary, we have 39 of the properties acquired and returned to grass lots at this point.
Wow.
We have one property that's actually in the process of a real estate closing, 2 properties that have been appraised, but we're waiting for owners to finalize their agreements on being bought out, and then we'll be able to move to a closing on those. One that was approved for acquisition by council, either last meeting or the meeting before, and then we'll have one more coming to council next meeting, it looks like. And that's about a total of about $9 million of property acquisition and demolition that we're working through. And I wanted to bring it up, one, because we've had a number of these HMGP and FMA grants that we've been talking about in committee recently. But also I just wanted to remind the committee that, you know, the original plan for these was just to kind of do the buyouts, remove the kind of the risk category from the flood insurance, which is why they're supported as buyout grants from NFIP and FEMA, and, you know, have some reduction in stormwater generation as well from taking you know, a lot that previously had a home on it and then returning it to grass property. But just wanted to remind everyone that we did acquire, or we did win that NIFWIF grant. It's the first NIFWIF grant we had applied for about a year ago. We applied for it and we found out we had won in the fall. NIFWIF's been a little bit delayed on actually providing the award paperwork and handing out money from the coronavirus situation, but they're still on track with that. We've been in conversation with that. So the plan is still assuming that they continue with the calendar they've established, that will go out for a request for qualifications from engineering firms in the next month or so. And then in the summer, select a firm to go work with us, the Clemson Extension Office, the Nature Conservancy, our grant partners in this project, to design retrofits to these buyout properties in Church Creek that we can then use to not just be a grass lot, but actually to provide an enhanced stormwater benefit, and also look at providing potentially some community secondary benefits as well, whether it's for naturalization on some of the lots, or if we'd look to provide some community options for sort of a maybe not like a true recreation, but sort of a secondary recreation aspect. So we're looking at doing that this summer, selecting those firms that'll let us move into design on those through basically the end of 2020 and into early 2021. But this is where we kind of tie into what we just found out from NIFWIF a little while ago with the larger grant we had applied for in Church Creek to actually do what we call the mid-basin storage projects, where we're going to acquire much larger pieces of property and build more natural features, flood benches, wetland restoration. So I'll be tying this grant into that grant and looking to do property acquisition on those parcels also through the early part of 2021 with likely that same design firm. We'll be moving into permitting on these parcels in 2021 while we're constructing the smaller parcels. So we're going to try to run these things in series or in parallel rather than waiting to do them in series, so we can kind of keep many things going at the same time. And then we'll move into construction on those larger parcels likely towards the end of 2021, early 2022, depending on what the permitting process is like. So that's kind of just a general sense of where we're going with those and what kind of timeline to expect. I think that Councilman Griffin, we've talked about this a little bit. That'll be a really great segue into building the Church Creek Outreach Committee we've talked about, that they can kind of get engaged in this project. And there's something from everyone from small individual lot landowners to HOA presidents to large commercial property owners, all to kind of be engaged in this work and do a lot of outreach as part of that project.
Okay, great. Any questions of Mr. Fountain? Councilman Griffin, any input?
I've been on council for, this is my 3rd year. You know, next year will be the end of my 1st term. And one thing that was really important in these first 4 years, I thought, was that we needed to really have a good solid plan of action, how we're going to improve Church Creek. And it seems to me like there's been a lot of positivity. We've made a lot of progress, but I still don't see a succinct plan of how we're going to attack it. We talk about it at these meetings, but never have I actually seen a blueprint or a map of what our plan is and mapping out the next, not just 6 months or a year and, hey, we're going to do this or we're going to look at doing that. We should be looking at a 10-year plan for this thing or longer. We already know that it's going to cost several $1,000,000 to fix the previous problems that we've been dealing with. And, you know, we've had great movement on that, like creating a TIF district and that sort of thing. So it seems like we're moving in the right direction, but it would be nice if we could all sit down and look at an actual plan where we could say, you know, okay, here's what the short-term goals are, here are what the long-term goals are, and put that out there for our community to understand that we are talking about this all the time and we're working on something that can't be built in a day. Rome wasn't built in a day. And we honestly are having to spend most of our time fixing mistakes that were made previously before our time, or mistakes that were made by other entities, not necessarily ourselves. And I don't think people understand really the relativity of what we're trying to do. And I don't really blame them. Their thought process is, I've got water in my yard. I've got water in my house. I didn't have that 5 years ago. I have that today. So for just our constituents, their reasoning is, okay, well, something's not right. We just saw it last week when we got 8 or 9 inches in one night at high tide. West Ashley, I had water in my yard for the first time in 2 years last week. James Island, they had water. I mean, some people had water 6, 7, 8 inches in their house. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're not doing a good job of moving forward and making progress, because we are doing that. We just have to be able to understand why these things are happening, what positive changes we've made, and how we can explain to somebody on James Island or somebody in suburban West Ashley why there's still flood events today, even though we have made a lot of progress these last couple of years. And so I have a tough time explaining that. I don't know about y'all. People don't want to hear, well, it's coming, changes are coming, and we're going to get there. They want to hear that we're doing things now. And getting grants are not sexy. People don't want to hear that. They want to hear that we've got an excavator coming to their ditch tomorrow to clean it out. So I'm just wondering, I know I'm kind of venting a little bit, but I know we've done a lot of good things, but I just wish there was some way that we could concise that into putting that out there as literature for people to understand what we've done and where we're going. And I loved everything about this discussion that we just had. And Matt, I think that's a great game plan. But can we see that something that, you know, because I always am afraid that 6 months from now, things are going to change and we're going to have a different game plan. So are we sure that's how we're going to attack it? And that's going to be our priority. And if that's the case, can we get it on paper so that we can continue to have a round table about this kind of thing? Because these problems aren't going to go away anytime soon.
Okay, Councilman Griffin, I think that's obviously good input. Mr. Fountain, could you address his issue about a plan? In other words, really, what is the plan? In other words, what's the solution to alleviate some of the flooding that we all are concerned about out in that Church Creek area? Is it going to be a pump station? Is it not going to be a pump station? Where are we on that?
It's a good question, Mr. Chairman, Councilman Griffin. So that's been something that we've tried to focus in on Church Creek, of saying we need to make sure we're not just looking at the 10 or 15 year down the road solution, but actually making sure we're making progress in the short game as well. But you're right, we don't want to lose sight certainly of the kind of that 10 year, 15 year out progress plan, which is what a lot of large capital projects obviously take. I think what I tried to lay out just a minute ago is sort of what we've done in the last about year, which was mostly the acquisition of those and demolition on those 39 homes, but then also kind of what we're doing over the next 2 to 3 years. But we did just have our outreach coordinator start kind of right literally at the middle of the coronavirus setup. But I think that's part of what we had envisioned with that position, is trying to get more information out to the community. Because like you're saying, I think what the engineers typically know what we're working through, but that's not always easy to communicate back to the citizenry. So I think that's certainly a good path to get the outreach coordinator working on, is to say, let's try to make this a little clearer. And I think we've talked about this outreach council or committee in Church Creek, the citizenry committee, for quite a while. I think that would be a good thing for them to work on, is how do we spread that news? How do we spread that information back out to the community? Because yes, the path we've seen right now, at least for the next 2 to 3 years with the funding we have available, are sort of these twofold approach that focusing on the significant investment we've made into property acquisition, trying to leverage that into doing more improvements, incremental improvements. And then secondly, is the kind of number 2 on the list, actually, is the discussion of how we've tied Long Branch Creek into Church Creek as a potential outfall. These are sort of the 2 projects that were approachable with relatively immediate benefits from what we're talking about from an engineering perspective, in terms of 1 to 3 years.
Right.
And something that we could actually get to work through. I don't want to lose sight of what we need to do in the next 5 to 10 years, but this is kind of what we've been focusing on the last 6 to 12 months, is trying to ramp up and get something underway. But you're right, the next step would be then to go back and say, okay, how do we continue to build this into more long-term projects?
Mr. Fountain, why don't we, or can we, again, use technology, for example, and there are things being done, such as you just mentioned, but is there a way we can build a website on accomplishments in different areas of the city? Because we work obviously on multiple fronts.
Yeah.
So when certain things are done, it'd be great if people just can, for example, earlier today, I clicked on the webcam site for the International African American Museum. There's a camera up there that you can click on, and you can actually see the guys out there working right now. But also it fed you into different occurrences with the IM. For example, it had one with a religious program that was done. It had one with another video with Dr. Lonnie Bunchen addressing who's the president of the Smithsonian, all the Smithsonian museums, talking about the importance of the IM. And it went on to a half a dozen things. If you were so inclined to click on all of them, and all of them very valuable. But if we can have something like that done, Mr. Mayor, with maybe Tracy and some of her talent, that would combine every time. See, the problem is when we get something done, 12 months later, it's almost like we didn't do it. It's almost like what's next on the agenda, but we're actually building some pretty good. I remember when all those people were crying to be bought out. Now we're talking about a grassy area that, those people hopefully moved on to housing at a drier site. But is there a way we can, if I want to click on what's happening on James Island or Johns Island or South Windermere or areas West Ashley or on the peninsula for that matter, can we? I don't think we can do that now, but I think maybe we can use technology to help do that, Mr. Fountain.
So it is a good point. That's a large part of what we brought the outreach coordinator on for, and in part because we actually do have a lot of that information available on our website. It's often that people just don't know it's there because we haven't done a good job of getting it out. We actually do have like a live camera and panoramas of the low battery construction. We do have a live camera for the Spring Fishburne construction where you can watch the construction. We do have a project storyboard that actually GIS helped us build previously, where you can go through kind of the projects we've built over the last few years and where they are and what we're working on in different areas. But they're generally a little hard to find. They're not necessarily well publicized. That's the challenge generally with engineers, right? As engineers are pretty much focused on doing the work, not necessarily talking about the work. So we did have the budget ad hoc committee and then council allow us to hire that outreach coordinator position to do exactly what you're talking about, and say, hey, let's make this a little more user friendly, let's make it more visible, and let's do a better job getting the word out about it so that people are aware that it's there. Because you're right, we're doing a ton of great work. It's just trying to make sure people understand where we've been and where we're going, like Councilman Griffin was talking about.
Right. Okay. All right.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir, Mr. Councilman Griffin.
A good example of that, honestly, was one of the campaign literatures that the mayor sent out, where it had a map of the city or the map of West Ashley, and it had the little dots all around from different projects.
Right.
I'm pretty sure they actually won an award for that. But wouldn't it be cool if we had a website, like you're saying, that it was a map of Charleston and it had dots of all of the different things that we had been doing the last 5 to 10 years, so people could click on it and say, oh, that's a great project that they did there.
Right.
And I mean, that would be something that would be really innovative, I think, for our city, especially since now, you know, our whole game plan is changing with what we're dealing with right now.
Right.
And we're going to have to, you know, all of us, our city council, our staff, and all of our residents are going to have to be really patient right now, because we're going to have to make a lot of changes. But it would be good to show them all of the progress that we've been able to make these past few years. Just so as things change this year and into next year, we can say, look, we're not forgetting about all these projects. We just have to make sure that we have all of our priorities in order to set us up again for the future. And here's a look at all the projects we've accomplished in the last 5 years and how these projects can lead to much bigger successes as a whole. Like we talk about Bridgepoint. Eventually, Bridgepoint is going to be a really great passive park, I think. And I know the mayor and I, we're going to have a meeting over there to discuss what we could do over there. And that's kind of been put on hold with this virus. But you're talking about 4 acres over there. And I think a pretty low cost to make that a really effective space. I mean, it is beautiful over there. The grass is growing in. I think for a relatively low cost for a park, you're going to have a really, really great space. And it's going to be a night and day difference. I mean, just a couple of years ago, it was, you know, a condominium complex that looked like a ghost town. And here it is going to be something positive. And that's a message that we all can send out to our constituents is, hey, as a city, we're looking at taking some negatives and turning them into big positives. And that gives people hope. And that's what we're going to need to get through this thing together is hope.
Oh, yeah. I agree with all of that. Okay. Any input from any other council members?
Mr. Chairman.
Mayor had a question.
Yeah, let me recognize Mr. Mayor, and then I'll get you, Peter.
Thank you. So wonderful suggestions here, and continued work on communications we all recognize we need to do. Again, that's why we hired this new outreach coordinator that just recently started, right, Matt? Didn't she just start?
Yes, yeah, basically right in the middle of the coronavirus.
Yeah. So more to come on that. But back to Councilmember Griffin's original observation, which frankly I concur with, that and maybe we're at a point now, Matt and everyone, where we can at least list out more of the long-term plan for the basin. What happened, you know, we starting with the big rain back in 2015, we were really wandering in the dark. And we had Bob Horner and Weston Sampson do that study, and they had those certain recommendations. Well, you know, we've all evolved. We've all been learning. And then we of course, invited the Dutch into the dialogue, and they had a little different approach to it. And we kind of pivoted a little bit along with that to think about opening up the storage and whether the pump system was really needed. And so what Matt was reporting on, of course, is really fulfilling some of those ideas from the Dutch dialogues. But at the same time, you know, the connecting Lake Dotterer with Long Branch was one of Bob Horner's recommendations, as was trying to get a connection from the north side of the basin across
North Storage.
One. And so some of those ideas from Horner are still more than valid. They definitely are on the to-do list, but I don't think we've really done and I don't think it's a really complex thing to do. Since the Dutch dialogue kind of recrafted what the total strategies are for the basin. We're doing some of them right now, but we don't have it in one list and stamp, call it a plan.
Right.
And I'd like to think that's a great idea and something that that we would need to kind of internally put together, but then get our new coordinator for outreach and this committee to help us push out there. Good idea.
Okay. Councilman Shaye?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, we started off this talking before the meeting began about Zoom meetings and the new technology that we have available to us. And to sort of coattail what Councilman Griffin's been talking about is that getting information out to our constituents is critical as to what is taking place. And, I hope Mr. O'Brien's still on the line with us. Picking up, for instance, the trash debris the last 2 or 3 weeks. I know they were working their rear ends off on that, and my appreciation to Matt for all the work that he did. But just getting information out to our constituents a lot better just makes all of our jobs a whole lot easier. Folks want to know what we're doing, when we're doing it, where we're doing it, and how we're doing it. And we're doing it. I mean, the proof's in the pudding with all of this. And I've been fussing about, getting this out a little bit better on scheduling. Something as simple as, when is that truck going to come down Gilmore Street or Windy Lane or whatever piece of property? I mean, they did a great job considering what they were working with and all of that. But a lot of the calls we had back last week, and particularly with this huge downpour, I know we all did. We all got these calls of, come out and see what is happening in my backyard, come see what's happened on my street. It's just a matter of being able to communicate that to our constituents. And also what Councilmember Griffin has brought up is that they're looking for some of the simple stuff to be done. I know we've got this money set aside, some of these projects, and we've in the priority list we've been dealing with for the past several meetings, but they're also looking for how are we going to have regular maintenance on our ditches, and what kind of schedule we have on doing that. So, I mean, I think we're all talking about the same thing. I think we're all pushing in the same direction, but the frustration level is, I do anyhow. I spend a whole lot of time bugging people like Mr. O'Brien or Mr. Altop or Mr. Fountain as to when is this happening? When is that going to take place? And we can eliminate me being the middleman for a lot of this stuff if our constituents were just made aware a lot better of what we're doing, where we're doing it, and how we're doing it, and come up with a better plan with all of that. So I think that at the next meeting, we just need to come up with something more concrete as opposed to us just repeating ourselves and talking about this. We can, as you say this often, Mr. Chairman, we could do better. And I think we certainly can do a lot better sharing our communication and what is taking place with all of this.
Thank you, Councilman. Mr. Mayor, maybe we can put a slot on the agenda for the new person that's been hired. As they begin to ramp up, they can report out to this committee. Either that or we'll just be having this conversation again. I think some great ideas have been thrown out. But I think one action step is, I know it's a new person, but as they begin to coordinate with Mr. Fountain and their activities, maybe that person can report on a regular basis to this committee as well.
Well, we'd certainly like to introduce her to y'all.
That'd be good.
But I must say, Councilmember Shea, that the job is to create the tools for you to be able to continue that wonderful communication with your constituents, but put the tools in your hands to be able to help you do that.
Right. I agree.
Yeah.
Mr. Fountain, are you finished with F1 and ready to go to F2?
Yeah, we certainly can, Mr. Chairman. I will say that I might just want to give a little bit of time for our outreach coordinator to get up to speed. I think we buried her under at least a year's worth of trying to learn how stormwater management works and bring all of our websites and our projects and everything else up to speed. So I know she's pretty much not breathing much trying to get through all of that, but I do think it's a good idea to get her.
Okay, well, we'll use
all of
your
you and understand your
we'll
priorities
use
as
your
well.
discretion on that, Mr. Fountain. I mean, obviously you have a little better hands on, but when the time is right, but let's put it like this, we'll be asking about it. So
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, F2, Mr. Fountain, is that going to be you?
Yes, yeah. thank you,
Councilman
Mr.
Waring,
Chairman.
Yes,
do
Councilman
you mind if
Ross?
I just make a brief comment? I just want to echo
Of course.
everybody's.
Of course.
I just want to echo everybody's comments here today. I think these are all great points, and we all can do. There's like the mayor said. I mean, this is a learning process for society, the city, the
Yeah.
public, nonprofits. I mean, this has just been the issue that's been kind of neglected in the corner for a long time. It just so happens to be, one of the most important issues that we face. I mean, in my vision, in the future, there needs to be a complete change in attitude and understanding from a society standpoint regarding the importance of stormwater management. I think this is what the Dutch Dialogues was driving at. I mean, our stormwater department needs to become as ubiquitous as our police department, as our fire department, as our trash pickup. I mean, I think that, I sure have learned a whole lot over the last year or so involving this issue. And the public needs to as well, because, Matt, I don't think would say this in a committee meeting, but, his department is asked to do a tremendous amount of stuff with limited resources.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we're just not even close, in my humble opinion, we're just not even close to being set up from a state standpoint, from a regional standpoint, from a county standpoint, from a city standpoint, to be funding, like, forget about the big sexy infrastructure projects, the Army Corps thing and the spring fish. I'm talking easement acquisition, regular maintenance, the stuff that's just, and this is the stuff that's most predominant in James Island and West Ashley. So by getting this issue more out into the public, better, raising the profile, raising the visibility of what stormwater management is, what Matt's department does, will help us when it comes time to make those important and difficult pushes on the funding side of things, so that he and his department and his team and his folks, which are doing an unbelievable job right now, can start developing the sort of, community buy-in necessary to take this whole enterprise to the next level, which is really what we need when you start talking about the kind of proactive maintenance and the proactive management that you would need to make sure we're prepped for the kind of events that we got last week. That's what we're going to need. So I think this is a wonderful discussion, and I think we need to continue it. So thank you.
I agree. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Fountain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so item 2 is sort of a direct follow-on from item 1, in that it's the next round of the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grant opportunities, the NIFWIF, which is their kind of their annual, they sort of do it twice a year, but major grant award or grant application opportunity. The project that we wanted to bring Public Works Utilities up to speed on, the project that we're considering for application on this one is the downstream improvements to Long Branch Creek.
Right.
This is downstream, obviously, of the pipe improvements from Lake Dotterer that we've talked about, where we're working with the county on their Glen McConnell widening project to try to install some additional capacity under Glen McConnell, which then ties, Lake Dotterer has its own flooding issues. Lake Dotterer also experiences flow in from Church Creek. So that was, as was mentioned, part of Weston Sampson's review of improving the Church Creek Basin, is providing an additional outfall pathway here by reconnecting an old creek system. Weston Sampson is doing that work for us as well on looking at the permitting and the work with DOT. However, the more modeling and research we've done, as we've talked about, the more it's clear, in order to fully realize improvements in the Church Creek Basin, you also need to do improvements to Long Branch Creek, not just improvements to the current constriction under Glen McConnell.
Mm-hmm.
This is a project that Noaa has been looking at for a long time, is doing some research in natural systems work in the Long Branch Creek system. Noaa is actually the funding agency for the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. It's where they receive a lot of their funding. So we're looking to partner with Noaa on this application to say, let's go back down through kind of this old Rice Dyke system. It has some constrictions with Rice Dykes, has some constrictions with the Greenway actually. Highway 17 is a constriction, though certainly a much larger project than we're looking at in this first round of improvements. And it fits very well in. And again, with NIFWIF only funds project work that is based on natural systems, floodplains, wetlands, trying to bring kind of back a natural habitat as well as create flood resiliency. It also ties into most grant agencies like to support work that builds upon earlier work that they've awarded. So it builds upon the Church Creek grants that we've received. And again, they also like to reward multiple government agencies working together, which this one, again, we have the county, the city, and Noaa all looking to contribute to this grant opportunity. So I think it's where we're looking right now. We've been in some discussion with NIFWIF and Noaa about it, and I just want to bring Public Works Utilities up to speed on it and get any input from the committee before we come back, in a month or so with potentially a request for an application.
Mr. Fountain, let me ask a question.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know of any roads being built anytime soon, West Ashley, James Island, but when Glen McConnell was built and they filled in that connection, could something like that happen today? I mean,
So
there should have been culverts put in there from inception, and it seems like to me, nobody was looking back then.
Yeah, it's pretty common throughout the Low Country that a lot of the roads that were constructed, they either would match whatever small pipe had been there before. A lot of Charleston was dirt roads not that long ago. A lot of the roads we see are part of the farm to market road system from not that long ago. I think what they would frequently do is just say, well, this road had a pipe roughly this size in it. We'll build that same pipe in when we build a full paved major road system. But often that drainage likely either overtopped and the road would wash out and they'd replace the pipe, or there'd be other situations. There certainly hasn't historically been an evaluation of, is this pipe appropriately sized for the overall watershed? I mean, we see this on Forest Acres at Playground Road. We see it on Glen McConnell. In this situation, you can see it on Main Road. There's some challenges with the different pipe situations. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on about this, but you're exactly right, Mr. Chairman, that this has been a real challenge of trying to deal with these constrictions. I think Councilwoman Jackson, as I was on the call, for Central Park Road, this is one of the major hangups on the whole Central Park watershed, is that road has massively undersized pipes in the system. And then what happens is you build a major road like that, and everyone who's developing their properties goes downstream or upstream and says, oh, this is what the major road has under it. I just need to build that same size pipe on my road.
Yeah.
And we have changed the city's manual that you can't do that. You have to do that basin analysis. So from a city MS4 perspective, you have to actually look at how much water is coming to your area. You can't just rely upon the fact that the pipe upstream is a smaller pipe. We've made that one of our major pushes, because that's exactly what happened in Barbary Woods. Is
Right.
One pipe was missized, and then all the following pipes were missized, and it created an almost uncorrectable challenge for any kind of small scale project. It turns into a major project. It's something that DOT, I think, is doing much better on it. They also are trying to require you to look at service area for pipes when there are outside sources doing work. But it is an area that we've spent a lot of time focusing on as a city, of trying to identify where are these constrictions on our roads and on DOT roads, to make sure that as new projects come in, everyone is aware of what the issue is so they can get addressed and fixed as part of the project.
Thank you, Mr. Fountain. Okay, any questions on F2 on the grant application? Hearing F3, is that going to be you too, Mr. Fountain?
Yes, yeah, it is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So F3 is one that we've sort of brought this up a few times over the last few months, and I think it generally gets cut off for time because our meetings tend to go on for a little while sometimes.
Right.
It's been sort of in a few different areas, but it's just trying to get, again, the committee up to speed on where we stand with the pump stations. This is primarily, we'll be talking about the Concord Street pump station, which serves what's known as the Calhoun East Basin and the Market Street Basin. So it serves a lot of the east side of the peninsula. The pump station was installed over 20 years ago. There was an upsizing when the Market Street project went in. They added another pump into the system and did a little bit of improvement work when they tied into that tunnel. But it is an older station. It operates in very harsh conditions. It's something that we've started to see over the last year, some progressive maintenance challenges. We had to upgrade the computer systems because they were no longer supporting some of the computer systems in an IT perspective, not our IT department, but IT as a international subject matter, that these were devices that were no longer supported by the manufacturers. We're starting to see a little bit more challenge with having to have kind of emergency responses to the pumps. So we did come in about 6 months ago. We went through and developed a true 20-year O&M plan for the station, for both stations actually, of saying here's all the work that really should be done on recurring 20-year cycles and when replacements are necessary, kind of doing a true miniaturized capital / O&M plan for these stations. I did want to kind of bring the committee up to speed on that hasn't really been historically how the pump stations have been treated. So there is, again, quite a bit of deferred maintenance on these systems. It was one of the things we'd recommended in the small project category because of how much cost there is in deferred work that's looming without kind of a existing budget allocation. We'll talk about it in budget ad hoc again this year as well, now that we're kind of up to speed and aware of what it is. But basically we're dealing with a set of primary pumps that are generally 20 years old and a series of electrical systems and control systems that are also of similar age and are mostly no longer manufacturer supported. We've been very fortunate in that we have a really spectacular company that works with us to kind of hand rebuild a lot of these systems and pumps each time we've had them going down over the last year or two. But there is I guess, increasing risk, obviously, with it. Eventually something breaks that you can't retrofit. So we do have a scope for the kind of the preliminary engineering to go in and basically upfit the electrical systems, the mechanical pump systems, and the control systems. But this is something that's going to become, it's always easy to defer, which is why I want to kind of get the committee up to speed on. It's easy to kind of push back on maintenance and defer maintenance because it's not as exciting as capital projects. It's not as exciting as new work. But this system really is an important system for us that maintains a lot of the east side of the peninsula. So I just wanted to kind of let you know, as you see proposals coming and see funding requests coming for these, that it is important, and see if there were any questions or, again, any information I could provide, as Councilman Griffin was talking about earlier. What information does the committee need basically to help make decisions on these kinds of situations?
You know what, Mr. Fountain, I think our the whole idea of essential work or essential workers is taking on a whole new look after this virus. And believe it or not, and this is one of the things that Councilman Appel alluded to, is it's not sexy, but you know what? God knows it's needed. So I don't know, we got to find we shouldn't have to apologize for updating maintenance. I mean, and I know you wasn't apologizing, but it's something that should be forthright. I mean, it's something that that moves us forward. So we got to find a way to put a positive spin when we did the half-cent sales tax, Mr. Mayor, you may remember this. We had a number of referendums, and when we finally got it passed, after a couple of times it passed, and you remember Joey Duan took it to court and all of that kind of good stuff. But after that, I'll never forget, we made mention that anytime a project was done with half-cent sales tax money, there would be signage out there. And that's where we all got used to seeing this half penny on those signs. Whatever roads it was, whatever intersection that had monies that came out of that $1.2 billion funding, so people would know, hey, this is part of my increase in taxes. So that kind of gets back to what you were saying, Councilman Appel. When people come out to clean the ditch, I mean, those people should be, we need to have something positive out there when those crews are out there, so people will know this is ongoing, trying to help your neighborhood. We can find out a better way to market it, but it definitely needs to be something seen as a positive, as opposed to it's about time type attitude, frankly, that some of those guys and ladies run into. Any input from council members on the pump station or the maintenance that Mr. Fountain just addressed?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
I guess I'm dating myself a little bit, but I remember when I was working for the city in the 90s when we finished the project and installed that pump station. And I know we got so many things still to work on, but that was really a success of the past. And that rain we had the other night, and I know there's still intersections like this in Charleston. We can rattle them off, but a rain like that the other night and the corner of Calhoun Street and East Bay Street would be probably at least 4, if not 6 feet deep.
Oh, yeah.
Within an hour, within 1 hour, just a good summer afternoon thunderstorm, and you could not go through that intersection. And that does not, it has not happened in the last 20 years. Not many people remember that. And I remember the property owners on the corners used to call Mayor Riley and there'd be some very interesting conversations. I heard a few of them back then. So speaking of PR, so we still have to celebrate some of those things, but also it's really hit me in the head here how important the maintenance of that system is. I know we, like Matt or you said, doing the new project and solving something new is so great to do, but that was a big accomplishment, not just for that intersection, but for all of Upper Meeting Street.
Right.
And then it connected with Market Street, which we still haven't quite completed yet. So the maintenance of that system is as important as finishing Spring Fishburne. I mean,
Right.
It's at that level, and we can't. Sometimes we get so focused on the new stuff, we defer, and we can't do that for something so critical as that pump station. And I think that's why Matt has brought that to us today. We need a budget. We need to work it into the capital project budget, even though it's a maintenance item. It's a real item, and it's a critical asset for our system.
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm gonna have to date myself. I remember when you needed a boat to get through that intersection too. So
It was also the market area that was greatly impacted by these pump stations too. It was Market Street.
it was meeting. It was meeting in King Street as well.
Yeah. No, they made a huge improvement on that.
Well, as I said in the meeting, start at the beginning of the meeting, that there's a couple of new business items that I want to bring up. I got a report on the recent downpour that St. Philip and Ratcliffe Street, Mr. Fountain, flooded, which is, man, that's one of the high routes to get out of town. So I'm thinking maybe a drainage or something was clogged over there, or maybe we need to look down some pipes or something. But that's where St. Patrick's Church is, Mr. Mayor. That's where the St. Patrick's Day Parade begins. That intersection never floods, so it's got to be some sort of stoppage or something like that. Now, I was going to ask Mr. Fountain to provide an update on the city's general storm maintenance operations. Not today, but maybe that could be part of the scheme of things. I was going to ask Councilman Ross Appel. He touched on it earlier, but maybe you can touch on it with a little bit more specifics than any other council member after that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, again, going back to the episode we had last week, I think kind of brought a lot of issues of flooding back on people's radar, certainly constituents, and I think I speak for every council member here today. I reached out to Matt and sort of went over and kind of renewed my understanding of sort of the city's process, sort of on the pre-storm event preparation and also the post-storm event recovery. And Matt provided a wonderful explanation about, what the city's practices are, what they do. And I just thought it would be good to kind of share that perspective, share that information with everybody. I hate to hand the baton back off after just receiving it, but Matt, would you mind sort of telling everybody what you told me last week about sort of the preventative and then also the recovery steps that your department takes?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, with your
Sure, Mr.
Sure.
Compton, go ahead. Sure, go ahead.
yeah, thank you, Councilman Appel. Yes, yeah, it is something we spend a lot of effort on. It's when we basically see a predicted storm, especially one like that where we're expecting more than a half an inch or an inch of rain, especially if there's a chance of high tides like there was for this event. We have what are called rain day schedules, where basically the crews are put onto inspections of sort of known problem areas around the city, and they go do visual inspections to see if there's any obvious clogging they can address or fix on the day or two before the storm. And then immediately following the storm, and the next couple of days of work as well, they'll go through and look for anywhere there is standing water, where there is an accumulation of debris. One of the real challenges we get in these storms, especially if you get a storm like we did the other day, which luckily we don't get those too often, but when you get a heavy flooding where you start seeing water really moving down gutters or coming up onto front lawns, you see a lot of debris generally get picked up from people like kind of having their yard debris out on the curbs, and that debris
Right.
gets picked up and then
We had
immediately,
that.
yeah, it gets immediately pulled down the drain to obviously to where the next pipe or grate inlet is. I mean, it flows with the water to where the water is trying to go. Generally, a lot of our systems are sized to handle some of that, but if you get a piece that gets stuck or clogged across a pipe or across a grate, the first piece gets stuck and then it acts kind of like a sieve, and it collects a few sticks, and then the sticks get stuck in the large piece, and then the sticks start to accumulate leaves, and then the leaves start to accumulate dirt, and it's basically a big filter bringing all that water through, and you get a really good clog sometimes. So sometimes it blows the clog back out again and you're all right. That's the idea of you hear us talk about self-cleaning velocity sometimes in jest with the manual of what is an appropriate self-cleaning velocity, but that's exactly what we're talking about, is how much debris can you remove on a typical system like that. So that was kind of a long way of saying that the post-cleaning is almost as important as the pre-cleaning, because you don't want to have it immediately flood in your next rainstorm after the first rainstorm. This time we got lucky and we had a few days of really nice weather and heat, but sometimes we'll get a follow-up thunderstorm the next day and we want to make sure we clean that out. The challenge that we have is, that sounds great. I mean, it sounds like we're doing the right thing, and I think we are. The challenge that we always run into is you always have to remember that we have about 40 total people. We have about 10 to 20 people who are doing hand clean ditch work. And then we have another 10 to 20 people who are doing 6 factor trucks, and basically a couple of backhoes and a couple of mini excavators and masonry crews. So that, I think each one of you can probably think of at least 3 or 4 or 5 neighborhoods you would like us to check pre each storm. So when we do that, we do try to catch the obvious clogs, but we do miss things. I mean, if there's a clog inside a pipe, like we're not out cameraing every pipe pre-storm. We're not out cameraing every pipe post-storm. We do rely somewhat on standing water and reports of standing water to go back and clean. And one of the things we've noticed, we switched over to a proactive maintenance program about a year ago, trying to go through street by street, pipe by pipe through the city as best we can while still managing some of our work requests. Is there are large number of pipes and systems that have long-standing clogs in them. And I think Councilman Ranger just mentioning Philip and Radcliffe. I mean, we'll find streets not infrequently that clearly have been clogged for some time, and we'll find streets where we know we've cleaned them recently and they're clogged again, which happened in some of our watersheds. So I think that's where Councilman Appel was touching on this earlier, that it is kind of important to remember what level of service we can provide. I mean, I try to kind of get across the sense to residents sometimes, and I know it's easy to get frustrated, and I certainly understand or hear them when they're talking about how frustrating it is to have flooding occurring. But our crews really don't it's not more like a fire department where we kind of, there's some sitting and waiting for an emergency to occur. For us, I mean, we're proactively working every day. We just don't have the capacity to get to everything nearly as often as we want to be getting to systems. So we are right now trying to go through again, proactively clean. We're still coming up with the final schedule for how long that'll take, but we're thinking at least 3 more years just to proactively get back to having cleaned most of our systems over the last 4 years, one time. At that point, we'd like to get to where we can at least inspect our whole system once a year. But even that is still not really where I know a lot of residents would like us to be, but it's a it's a challenge. We're just talking about O&M costs versus capital costs. I mean, this pushes us right back into that same question of, you know, in a fixed funding situation, the more project work, the less maintenance work, the more maintenance work, the less project work. They're both incredibly important, and they're both keys to the puzzle. And that's part of what we're doing with this proactive system, is trying to figure out, well, what is the right balance and what do we need? So we're not just telling you as elected officials, well, it's not enough. We need to be able to tell you, well, what is it that we need in order to hit different levels of service? So that's the work that we're trying to put together now, is saying with this proactive maintenance, okay, here's where we are, here's what we can do with what we have, here's how much it would cost to get to this, you know, whatever the next level is, and then the next level about that. And we need to make decisions on what our priorities are for moving forward.
Okay, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I don't want to interrupt anybody's comments or response to Mr. Fountain, but Mr. Chairman, I don't know if word got to you. Speaking of new things to talk about, I had asked Mark Wilbert to be on the call.
Okay.
Last week, as you know, speaking of sexy projects, that was the term Councilmember Appel used. The Corps of Engineers, you know, released their preliminary plan. There's been a lot of reaction to that. Most of the public comments we have so far for tomorrow night are regarding that. So I asked Mark to be on this meeting to see or to ask him if he'd make a brief report about that, and to also see if it's the pleasure of the committee to have any questions of Mr. Wilbert regarding that.
Okay. Committee members, I hope by acclamation we can include them on the agenda.
Don't move.
All right, thank you. Before we go to Mr. Wilbert, Mr. Mayor, one thing that you had made mention when we had the last meeting, it could have been a council meeting. You had made mention about the new state director for AT&T giving a call, and basically they're going to be working on a solution for the second phase of the Forest Park drainage project.
Yes, sir.
And I'm just wondering if we can send her a letter of thanks coming from you for her to reach out and do that and getting that project back online again.
Yeah, I did that already. Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Okay, great.
I did thank her,
All right.
both on the phone and written as well.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. If you could, please, at your leisure, send me a copy of that letter when you get a chance, please. Okay, thank you. Unless there are any other input, I'll go to from any council members, I'll go to Mr. Wilpert. Hearing now, Mr. Wilpert, sounds like you're up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And
Yes,
what I'm going to do is go ahead and share my screen with you for a couple of different things. And we'll go right to this. So what I'm just going to do is very briefly take you through the study, and then please stop me and ask me questions if you so desire. You probably know a lot of this, and I don't know how much time you want to spend on it, but getting through this project very quickly. This is the area that we looked at and studied. I think everybody's aware of this. It was the entire peninsula. Can you all see my screen, by the way?
I can, yeah. I'm through.
Yes,
great.
sir.
So this was the entire project area in red. And it was, as you can tell, if you look at and I just want to see this for a minute, it talks about the value of the structures on the peninsula. So this whole project is based on a process that looks at what will it protect and what is it going to cost. And that from that equation, you get what's known as federal interest and a cost benefit ratio. So I think it's around, you're blocking my view here, it's about $14 billion of $14 billion of assets on the peninsula. And this project is due to cost about $1.75 billion. Now, you don't derive the cost benefit from that, but that's just a good understanding of the magnitude of dollars that we're talking about. In addition to that, you've got your cultural resources, archaeological treasures, et cetera, et cetera. As we go down a little further on this, the plan actually that we're talking about here, the tentative selective plan, that's the plan that was reduced that was revealed on April 20th. And in order to get to that, the study team assessed, obviously dozens of measures. And we came up with, just to shorten this, and I'll be happy to go through this in depth with anyone, Alternative 3 became the study's tentative selective plan. And Alternative 3 is what you see on this here, and I think you can see my cursor, is a barrier that goes around the peninsula at what's known as 12-foot NAVD 88. So it's 12 foot of elevation. That's engineering speak that I'm still learning. Down here on the very tip of the peninsula, that's what's known as a wave attenuation system, think jetty, just for shorthand. And these flags represent pump stations. So by law, the Army Corps of Engineers cannot construct a project that makes the area they're working in any worse than it is before they start. So the pump stations are there to take any of the water out, any additional water out of the area that may be caused by the fact that there's a wall there. A lot of people are worried about what's known as a bathtub effect. And that's what the purpose of those pumps is right there, to take those out. At the end of the day, those cost benefit plan is known as the National Economic Development Plan. And that's the one the Corps by law has to go with. They don't have a choice. So they've evaluated all of these alternatives. They have looked at the 43 different measures that could be put in place. Through that process of 18 months, they've come up with a barrier, a wave attenuation system, and then a couple of areas that are outside of the barrier where we would have to do some sort of flood proofing. Those areas, contrary to what you read in the paper this weekend, they're not left out of the plan. They're just left out of the wall barrier. So there'll be other ways to protect these that will be determined over the next 6 months or so. But they are not left out, and they're just going to be protected a different way. So again, going through that way, the measures that we talked about, storm surge wall, I showed you that. There's going to be gates in the wall as we go through this. This is just a poor example of what a storm surge gate looks like, but really what it is it's going to allow water to go in and out throughout the wall, except when we have a storm coming, we'll wait for low tide ahead of the storm, shut the gates. It gives us a lot more capacity now within the city for that initial flex. The wave attenuator really doesn't really show you much. There's a lot of work still to do on that. And then ultimately these pump stations that will be around here along with the non-structural measure. There's a picture of a permanent pump station. And of course, ours would probably be completely covered as we were going to do that. Project performance. This is the really important part. So the Army had to study in depth what kind of benefits was this going to give to the community. The first one was we had to look at health and safety. That's the first thing they have to do. Here's a picture of the peninsula and likely areas that would be flooded between now and 2075 at a 9-foot NAVD 88. You can see here that this covers a good part of the peninsula, just leaving pretty much the spine of the peninsula alone. Over here with project on this side, you can see that it's pretty much between now and 2075. These are pretty well protected as you go through that. Here's a little better way to look at it. Without project, 50% of your police stations are at risk of flooding, 42% of your healthcare facilities, 29% of fire stations, and these all go down to 0 with the project in place. So this is the health and safety side of this particular project. If you move on, we're looking here, the cultural resources in Charleston, particularly on the peninsula. The purple represents cultural resources. And again, you can see here without project, underwater, over here with project, and it's 54% without project of historic structures. And it's all in the 50% on this side. And it goes down quite a bit to 2%, 7%, and 13% with the project in place. So the economic breakdown of this is that the estimated total project cost is about 1.75 billion, and the average annual net benefits. So the way the Army does this is they annualize the benefits. And so using the methodology that they use, and I would have to have a PhD in economics to explain it to you extremely well, is that the city would see an average annual benefit, $94 million a year over 50 years. Every year for 50 years, that would be the amount of annual net benefit that we would see from doing this. And that's just simply through protecting what's on the peninsula, preventing the loss of the economy. I think if you think of a big storm, similar to Category 3 storm or so, it's essentially going to look like what we're going through with the virus right now, with everything being shut down. The difference would be we'd have to rebuild everything before we could get back to work. So that's the benefit on that. I want to go very quickly. So this is going to show you a little bit about, and I don't like to do these things too often because we tend to do a lot of these, but this is going to show you 7% of the study would be at risk. Study area. You know, we're dealing with sea level rise. That's part of the problem that we've got going on here. We got 462 properties inside the study area as repetitive loss. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here. You've all seen these Noaa storm surge maps. I'm sure of that. And I almost don't like to show them because the study's not really based on them. But we are at a lot of risk here on the peninsula, actually the entire city, if you look at the Noaa storm surge maps. This here is kind of a cool thing if you just want to look at this just for a second. Maybe not, because maybe it doesn't want to work for me. It's kind of a 3D viewer of what happens in the city over time, and it just takes you through. This is 1 foot NAVD 88. So if you think of 1 foot NAVD 88, think of about a 4.14 foot tide. And so you're already beginning to see a little bit of stuff happening in these creeks. 2 feet, now we're at 5.14. You can begin to see how it fills in on this side of the peninsula. This peninsula area is very, very, very low. Here's 3 foot, so now we're at about a 6 foot tide, and this is exactly what we see at about a 6.14 foot tide. Now you're going to walk into 7 foots, and here's, I mean, we all know this area right here, and you're going to see exactly what happens. This is exactly where the water goes when we have that little bit greater than a 7 foot tide. And you can drag this around the whole city. It would take a lot of time on this, but again, I'd be happy to show any and all of you this at any time. Now we're talking 8 to 9 foot tide. And this is, again, this is what we're seeing. And really, you know, this is storm surge. You can't pump out the Atlantic Ocean. You can when the tide goes down, but you can't stop the tide from coming in. And this is, again, what the city begins to look like with that type of a storm surge. And here's a little slightly different view of the peninsula as it begins to fill in. So that's about a 10 foot surge right through here. You can see it crawling up the expressway. And again, we've seen these. I've seen these in just a short time that I've been here. We've seen these tides come up through the thing. Here's the exceedance probability of these type of events. You can see the percentages over here, the height of the tide over here. And I'm not going to drag you through that. You probably have seen most of that. You've seen that. I'm not going to take you through that again. So the alternative analysis, like I said earlier, was the things we put in place. Alternative 3, which is the one that we looked at, is this one here. And we went through all of these various ways of assessing it and came up with alternative 3 as the best assessment. So this is on their website. I really encourage you to go on and take a look at this. It's very interesting to take a look at if you want to do that. I'll put a couple of things. This is really probably what you're being asked right now. We just released the plan on April 20th. There's 60-day comment period. That's going to end June 19th. We're going to finish up optimization, which is what they're in right now. Optimization is really trying to get the footprint pretty much where we want it to be. And then they're going to remodel everything. They've already modeled this all once. That's how we got to the first level. And let me just stop and say this peninsula will never, ever be modeled so intently as it was this time, looking at the economics of it. May of 2021 is the next one that's in red, because that's when the final study recommendations, and we're going to, as a city, be working with them through May of 2021. City's going to be asked to certify that it can meet its share of financial obligations for the study to go forward. And then the chief's report signed and the 3x3 complete. Sometime after that, we'll begin what's known as a preliminary engineering and design phase. That's where the first time we actually start kicking in money, and that's at a 50-50 cost share, is in what's known as the PED phase. This is the dollar and cents of it. Cost of the project is about $1.7 billion. There's about a $260 million interest factored in there. For investment cost right around $2 billion. And then, as I showed you earlier, annual benefits of about $94 million. Here's the city's contribution right here, would be at 35%, which would be $613 million. Of that $613 million, $129 million is for land and easements. I think the important thing to know is that we don't need all this money up front. That's not the way these work. We're not expected to write a check, $1 million. This will probably take 15 years to construct, or longer perhaps. I was just on the phone with Congressman Clyburn's office right before this. And there's things sitting in the back from years and years and years ago where money's been authorized but never appropriated. So these things take time to get done. But that would be our total cost share, will be that. And then I think that's it that I have for you on this study. We're into that 60-day comment period now. I encourage everybody to go on to their website. That's where I just pulled that storyboard from. And it does tell a really good story about how we would, how that study was put together. Any questions on the study at all?
Councilman Shahid, I saw your hand up.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mark, I just sent you a little email message as we're going through all this. So I invited Mark to come to my next constituent meeting to go through this exact presentation for folks in District 9 if they're interested in seeing this. I think they are, and I think that there's going to be a lot of interest from folks all over the city, in particular West Ashley. But I think one of the questions I have, and I talked to both you, Mr. Chairman, and the mayor about Mark getting in on this agenda item, is do we have an overall plan to getting this out to the public, to getting their input on this, besides what I just did, inviting Mark to come to one of my constituent meetings? Do we have some idea of presenting this to the city at large, or citizens, besides going to a website and pulling this up and offering public comment? And you know, the other issue that was been batted around was we're in the middle of this pandemic response, and we've got a ton of issues on our city plate about extending the comment period beyond, I think 60 days.
Yeah, 60 days. Yeah.
60 days. So those are my two main questions. I just want to get more, as much input from the community as we possibly can. I think we all do. I know we all do. But I didn't wonder if there's a particular plan we have on getting that out.
Well, I think the first thing is, I think the best way is to do exactly what you've asked me to do, which is come and speak via the council members. I think I've got council members that head out to their districts to see the plan. I think once we get a little more into seeing when we're going to be able to go out and do public meetings, I make myself available to go out and do a public meeting anywhere at any time. Other than that, I mean, I'm not sure what more we could do to get the information out on this. I mean, Army Corps' website is pretty darn good. They've got videos, they've got storyboards. I think absent the ability to get into a public meeting, which is what I think we all want to do, I think it's really difficult.
Mr. Wilford, what can we do as a city to ask for a longer period of time? I think Councilman Shahid is right on point. I think we all have heard from constituents.
Yep.
And 60 days, obviously, 60 days on something this important. It took, how long did the Corps of Engineers work on? Wasn't it something like 15 months or something like that?
18 months.
18 months. Thank you for the correction. So I think, I know that's not what we're doing, but the appearance is that we're rushing it through.
Yeah, I can tell you that question's been asked, and the Army Corps is working on a response to us right now. I don't want to go any further than that, but they have taken it to heart. The mayor asked very, very, very early on, and they have taken it to heart. They are bound by their regulations, and I will just say it's not a local decision. How does that sound?
Well, I understand that, but Mr. Mayor, I actually think we ought to do a resolution or something on that. I just don't believe that the majority of council, certainly including you, would be in favor of 60 days on something that is this impactful. We just need to learn a lot more about it. I mean, I'm talking about the citizenry. I mean, for example, we built a wall around the city, which initially sounds to make sense to me. But where does that water go, Mr. Wilford?
So-
we have a storm surge coming in, hypothetically 140 miles an hour, pushing this wall of water. It hits the wall. More than likely, it's going to be higher than 8 foot, but the water's not going to turn around and go back out to the ocean. That water's going to go someplace. And I'm wondering, I'm a fisherman, and I don't know how many of you all are, but if you've been out to the jetties, Folly Beach never had trouble with erosion to the degree that it does until the jetties were built, which was a man-made reef out there, and channel up there, a mile wide and a mile long. When the water cuts around that wall that was built, it goes over there and basically washes away Folly Beach.
Yep.
Does this water go to Moreland or North Bridge
So-
or further down the river, or does it go over to James Island? I mean, I think we need more than 60 days to discuss that. Okay.
I have an answer. I have a good answer for that. So if you look at the period August 2020 on the slide there. So as we finish optimization phase, which is where we finish up kind of where the footprint is, the Army Corps by law is required to go back and remodel. And one of the purposes of that modeling is to make sure that they're not doing any harmful impacts anywhere else.
I understand that. I mean, that sounds good. But when they built the wall, I mean, that at least that that artificial reef, nobody knew at the time that the currents would go over there and wash away Folly Beach. Some of these things we're going to find out potentially after it's built. Now, obviously, the modeling today, Mr. Wolford, would be a lot better and state of the art compared to whenever
Right.
the jetties were built. But there are going to be some unintended consequences. And I think, one thing about our citizenry, we got a very smart citizen group in the city of Charleston. They come up with questions that I'll never come up with, and maybe some of our council people won't. But we'll get them from, I'm impressed by the turnout with the Dutch dialogue that created a wealth of response from people. And I would suspect this would be very similar. So I understand they have their guidelines and their policies, but they've never had policies like this during a COVID or a virus like this that literally has affected the world while something like this is going on. So I think, Mr. Mayor, from a standpoint of where does the city stand on this, I think we need to let an official vote, let them know that how we feel. If you feel 60 days is enough, then obviously vote your choice. But I agree with what was written in the newspaper, man. I think you ought to have at least 4 months on this, but anyway. As you said, this is something, Mr. Wilford, that's gonna play out over a decade or more. We can put 3 or 4 months into discussing it with the public. Anyway, that's my take. Any
Okay.
input from Councilman? Very good presentation, Mr. Wilford. And I apologize. I didn't realize you were going to do the presentation, but thank you for the heads up, Mr. Mayor. Any input from council members to Mr. Wilford?
And if I can just share one more thing with you, I think that
Yes, sir.
would be helpful.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Griffin, I think, was talking about, do we have a show of where all of the major infrastructure projects are in the city? This has been up on our website now, the city's website, for about a year. And it literally takes you to every one of the projects that are going on in the city, talks about what they cost, takes you to their individual website that Mr. Fountain's crew keeps up. So this is a tool that you could use with just for education for your constituents. It's been up, like I said, for about a year now.
Okay.
Does kind of answer the questions of all.
Can you pull it up for us?
It's up right now. You can't see it?
No.
No.
Yeah, I lost the screen some time ago, Mark. I don't know.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, on my screen, it's frozen at alternative analysis. That's what I'm
Mine as well.
That's right. I am too. Same thing that Councilman Waring's saying.
I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on. Must be my internet or something.
It did come up and said internet interruption. There you go.
Okay, there you go.
I've
Can you
shared
see-
my screen. This is Tracy.
Hey,
All right,
Tracy.
Yeah,
thanks,
so you
Tracy.
can see that now.
I
Tracy,
can, yeah.
You just
I
click
can.
down all of those. If you just go down the buttons on the right, there you go. There you go.
Yeah,
It-
so if you click on
it'll
the
take you
first
to
button
all-
here, it takes you
Yep.
to all the projects, and then you can actually go to any of these specific projects.
Oh,
and it'll
wow.
take you to the page. So if I just pick King and UG, it'll take me to that project and give me some estimated costs and the start, and then the estimated end time of the project. So there's a lot of data, a lot of details in here.
Can you click on the Church Creek one real quick?
Sure. Church Creek, here we go. Whoop. Here we go. So, and there's another link to the actual Church Creek project webpage here. So if they have specific related project information, there'll be some links embedded in each of those.
See, and this is great. This is what I'm talking about, but we just need to update a lot of these projects and put more information. And maybe it's that we put more links or whatever, but you know, you look at Church Creek, we kind of have an estimate. We kind of, I mean, the estimated end, we don't know, but there's so many other things going on, small things that we've done that I don't think that does justice of what we have done over the last few years. So this is great. I didn't even know this existed, but if we could build off of this, it could be a really good interactive tool for our constituents.
Okay. I just didn't know how many of you knew it was on there and
I didn't. Thank you.
Can you
Thank
share that link with us, please, Mark?
yeah, it's right on the city's website under, I get to it, Charleston-sc.s. It's in the sea level rise page. But I'll
Yeah, if you go to the stormwater page on the city website, they have a link to it there as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other input?
Mr. Councilmember Ware, Mr. Chairman, I've got a couple of points.
Okay, Councilman Griffin?
For one, we talked about areas of downtown that have flooded recently that didn't in the past. I had a lot of calls about the area in front of Gibson Tire on Upper Meeting.
Oh, wow,
I
yeah.
know that the DOT has been out there several times, but I just wanted to know if Mr. Fountain or anybody in our stormwater department's been following along with that, because I know just today we had several cars get stuck in the water over there, and it's happened for the last 2 or 3 weeks very frequently. And then I've got one more point after that, but I don't know if he had anything on that, if he had heard about that.
Mr.
Sure, yeah, we've
Bowden?
actually been working with two of the property owners out there for probably about a month and a half, trying to support DOT and the Magnolia project, which are both under DOT permitting jurisdiction, on trying to address the drainage issues. I think DOT's kind of narrowed it down to thinking some of the pipes under the railroad tracks, from all the survey work and research we've shown them. And I think they had, from the last update I gotten from DOT, I think yesterday, they were thinking they would get their railroad permits to be able to work on the railroad tracks this week. We've been kind of keeping the local property owners up to date about that as well.
I figured that's what it was. I just wanted to be sure. Maybe if you find out what their plan is, you can let me know, because I have a lot of people over in that area through the port that call me about that project of what's going on over there. And
Yeah, they are planning to clean the pipes under the railroad track, basically that connect Meeting Street to King Street, to try to drain back to King Street, where I guess the work for Magnolia project that they're doing on King Street has been working to try to pump some of the water from that system back into the sewer system while they've got some of the drains blocked on the King Street system. So it does get pretty complicated, but you're right that the drainage has been really bad. And I know the owners have been
Right.
asking the police, I think the police have been out there, because a lot of the truck traffic has actually been driving through some of the closed areas and actually flooding some of the buildings from the wakes coming off of the
Right.
trucks coming through. So yeah, it's a tough site. You're right. It definitely needs to
Right.
get addressed.
that area has a lot of truck traffic, so we've just got to be careful through there. I appreciate y'all's hard work on that. And speaking of clogged pipes, a lot of us on council and yourself and others, Mr. Mayor, have been getting a lot of emails about a potential pipe over on James Island that I guess they have a James Island ditch committee or something, and they've been out looking at pipes. And supposedly they found a pipe that was clogged pretty significantly. And there's been a lot of question back and forth about whether or not it's the city of Charleston responsibility. Do you know anything about that, or have you been able to see those emails today?
I saw the video and I actually called and spoke to your friend Zeke.
Yeah,
my friend Zeke.
I remember when we went out there together, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, and so, and I talked with Matt about it earlier today, and he's already scheduled a crew to go take a look at it. They'll get out there this week.
Perfect.
Yes, sir.
If we all jump on that one, because I know that that is a very sensitive area already. And I know that they'll be very satisfied if we can jump out there and even if it's not ours, just get it cleaned out and hopefully find out more about that. I don't necessarily agree with well, it's probably been clogged for a long time. I don't know about that, but I'd love to hear more about that. If they did find some sort of pipe that hasn't been used recently, that would be good information to have.
Just, yeah, I can speak to that one very briefly if you'd like. That whole system, we actually, when I was still at the county, the city and county worked collaboratively to remove all of the fencing along that section of the system and actually did reconstruct the ditch line along EME Apartments and all of the outfall system all the way down basically to the marsh outfall in 2016 and 2017 after some of those rain events. So the pipes were certainly open at that time, were reopened at that time. We have been back there to clean them since that point, because this is one of the watersheds we spend a lot of time on with the kind of known areas of flooding. It is certainly possible that they did clog up again. I mean, we had quite a few events the last few months. We did have a Vector truck there this morning that started doing some cleaning work, and they're supposed to go back again to double check on the
And
last final section.
approximately how long does it take to clean that particular pipe? Do you remember?
So the challenges with the larger pipe systems like that are they're sort of in an awkward position between trying to clean it with a backhoe, where it's not quite big enough to easily
Right.
get in with a backhoe, but it's too big to easily feed back truck lozenges through. So those tend to be, for if the whole system had an issue, you're looking normally like a day to clean out that type of clog. If it's something they can get loose and it's just like a localized clog that breaks loose, that might be a few hours to get set up and be able to clean it out. That's sort of the time frame you're looking
But
at.
relatively speaking, this is something that can be fixed in a day and
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
relief pretty quickly. Okay,
Yes,
thank
absolutely.
you.
Okay, do you have a second question, Councilman Griffin?
That's it for me. Thank you so much, everybody.
Any other input from any other council members? Well, with that, Mr. Mayor, unless you have any final comments, I think that's,
Councilmember Jackson raised her hand.
oh, I didn't see it on the screen.
I'm so
Councilman-
sorry. Thank you for just letting me bring up a topic that I hope we can investigate between now and our May meeting. I talked to the mayor about this one. There's a little 24 property development up at the very top of Parrot Creek, Clark Sound area at the top of Drive. A lot of the properties on Schooner are in the town, but this 24 property subdivision that was allowed in 2008. I have the minutes from the Public Works Committee. Chip McQueenie's researched this. They got a temporary private gate system agreed to by the city while they were under construction, and that's 12 years. So up to now, they have 18 properties, 14 of which are occupied, another 4 are actively under construction, and we cannot open the gate to public travel until they get to 22 units. Mike Metzler told me that you remember this one, remember Waring, because it does seem like a taking. And
It is.
it's a very bad situation now where the city's basically been, scammed, I think. So when Mike was helping me in January and February, we were going to try to schedule a meeting with the HOA, which is what the legal department suggested we do first. But to be honest, I think we should just tell them we're not collecting their trash or maintaining their streets any longer, because they have us over a barrel and it's not right. So I would like to put this on your committee's agenda. I see that Mr. O'Brien is not at the meeting right now, but I'm happy to be the bad cop if you all will just make this go away. Thank you very much.
Councilwoman Jackson, I'll be happy to join in with you on that, because Mr. Metzler is right and Mr. O'Brien knows about it as well, and so does our legal team know about this. They took liberty with a temporary gate.
Yeah.
And they came and ended up putting up, I don't know, $100,000 gate back in there. They can't do that. That's a public street. Eminent domain will prevail on that. So, as a matter of fact, I like Mr. Boone, the attorney, but he did a good job stalling on this one. So I think it's time. That happened during my first term on council. I'm now in
12 years ago.
Yeah, my 3rd term on council. So yeah, put that on the agenda and we'll get some input from our legal on that. Thank you, Councilman.
Great, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. With that, I entertain a motion to
So
adjourn.
moved.
Second.
Probably moving saying by acclamation, we stand adjourned. Thank you.
See y'all tomorrow.
See you
All right.
tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.